we're able to hit the ship, which and it looks like with all our simulations that if we had not run short of hydraulic fluid about a minute before landing, that we would have actually landed. So with the next flight, we have 50% more hydraulic fluid margin. Something else could go wrong, certainly, but at least with respect to that, we should be covered. So then we've got a real decent chance in about 3 weeks of landing it.
Were you in Cape Canaveral watching it?
No, I was actually at Mission Control, which is here.
Here.
Yeah, but then if it had landed, I would have flown out to Florida to see come to port.
Yeah.
So I was there for the attempt a week ago. I was at Cape Canaveral, but couldn't get out there this time around.
Yeah, I hope you can see it and see it close up when it lands.
Yeah, that would be really great. I should make some good video.
Yeah, and that will be sort of a transformational moment. Really,
yeah, that's a really big deal. I mean, it's before. For all modes of transport, it's a night and day difference if they're reusable or not. I mean, you can imagine that if aircraft were single use, nobody would fly, or there'd be a handful of missions, like scientific and military purposes, but that's about it. And a 747 is $250 million. You need 2 of them for a round trip, but nobody's paying $500 million to fly to London and back. For our rocket, which is it costs about $60 million, which is actually the lowest cost rocket in the world, despite being reusable, or aspiring to be reusable. But still, $60 million is left. But if we could do 1,000 flights, then it goes from a $60 million capital cost to a $60,000 capital cost. Aircraft do tens of thousands of flights. So if we can just do an order of magnitude fewer flights conceivably than an aircraft would be, it's a giant difference. And the cost of the fuel and oxidizer and all that is comparable to that of an aircraft. So it's the fuel that we use is a sort of purified form of jet fuel. Jet fuel is sort of a type of kerosene. So because of our purity requirements, the cost per gallon is about twice that of jet fuel. But that's all. So instead of us paying, say, $2 or $3 a gallon, we'd pay $5 or $6 a gallon for the fuel. So it's really, basically it's a few $200,000 to $300,000 per flight in fuel and oxygen per mission versus a $60 million rocket. It's pretty giant.
I was wondering, given how significant this is, are you getting any more warm overtures from your what has historically been rather cold government connections? I mean, as a result of this?
Yeah, actually, we've NASA has certainly been a key customer of ours for a few years. For the first five years or 6 years of the company's existence, nobody would talk to us on the government side, NASA or the military, and we got a few sort of fringe customers on the commercial side. That was it. So we didn't have any government anything for the first half decade. Then NASA sort of nibbled a little bit, and we were able to get some like a small contract. Then we were able to get a much larger contract. And now NASA is actually a pretty significant supporter. They're about a quarter of our missions on NASA. So they're like they're sort of our anchor customer, our biggest single customer. The commercial missions are collectively are more than NASA, but the commercial missions are about 75% NASA, 25%. On the military side, we've not yet been allowed to compete for the primary military contract because Boeing and Lockheed have managed to shut down all competition. But we're close. I think we're getting close.
And close, you think, because of your very public challenge, which was unprecedented. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody had ever done it that way.
Yeah. Well, people have tried. But usually the military-industrial complex is able to resist any attack by a newcomer. It's just fighting this giant citadel with very high walls. And usually if a small force attacks a large citadel, it is not the citadel that falls.
So what makes you optimistic? You say you're getting close.
Well, I mean, there's this whole sort of certification process that we've gone through, which is we're being held to a much higher standard than Boeing and Lockheed were when they actually did their competition. But still, it's like the excuses get harder and harder, and thus far all the Falcon 9 missions have been successful in the ascent phase. So the federal law requires competition. That's like it's sort of fundamental. So they can stave off competition for a long time, and they have been able to do that. But they won't be able to do it forever unless we mess up. And we do have we have a lot of support actually in Congress. So the interesting thing is like the people fighting it are really in sort of the bureaucracy of the Pentagon and
the procurement officers.
Yes, the procurement officers who then go and work at Boeing and Lockheed or their prime contractors, that's actually what happened.
The revolving door. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to understand from a game theory standpoint because essentially we're asking them to award a contract to a company where they're probably not going to get a job against the company where their friends are.
Where they're already planning to go to.
Yes. So they're going to go against their friends and their future retirement program. This is a difficult thing to expect. So,
but you have a lot of support from senators like John McCain and Dianne Feinstein. And
we have broad bipartisan support in Congress, which is pretty great because the lobbying power of Boeing and Lockheed is, particularly combined, is really huge.
Are you having to spend more money on lobbying yourself in Washington than you ever imagined, just to compete in that arena? Or
yeah, I mean, if this was just a matter of lobbying power, we would have no chance.
Right.
I'm not sure what the combined Boeing and Lockheed sort of lobbying forces are, but I mean, if they send them all out at once, the sky's darkened. I mean, it's just like swarm. They have entire buildings of. You can see it as you go into D.C. with all the we've got half of one floor. That's so it's required a lot of effort from me and from other people at SpaceX, and to sort of find people in Congress who are ideologically motivated and who aren't swayed by lobbying, or only perhaps a little bit swayed. John McCain spent a lot of time in a Vietnam prisoner camp. Whatever else one may think of his politics, he is not easily intimidated. So he's really thinks this is a crazy issue because here we have the taxpayers paying like 3 times more for a rocket that, and I mean, Boeing and Lockheed, I mean, they make decent rockets, but 3 times more is really crazy. And then the main engine is Russian, and the engine maker is majority owned by the Kremlin directly. Not like there's not even a fig leaf in between. So why are we sending hundreds of millions of taxpayer money to fund the Russian war machine?
And the oligarchy,
in the interest of in the interest of national security, we're sending hundreds of millions of dollars to a country that is doing terrible things, and certainly not acting in our best interests. This makes no sense. It's like a Joseph Heller novel. It's like, it's so crazy.
So, is there any movement on the lawsuit in terms of private settlement negotiations, or?
Well, there's some discussions underway, I think, this week and next in D.C. So we'll see how it goes. But I do think the Justice Department is the one defending the Defense Department. They shouldn't be defending the Defense Department. I mean, this is crazy. They should be saying that they should care about justice. In fact, at one point, the judge actually had to remind the Justice Department lawyer that he works for the American people, not for Boeing and Lockheed.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, it's not making any sense.
So what does a decent settlement look like? What is an optimal result for you?
I think just taking a look at the missions that were awarded without any competition and saying which of those really should be open to competition. That doesn't mean that SpaceX will win. It simply means that we will have an opportunity to compete. Right. This is where the true absurdity of it comes in. It's like, which missions should no company have an opportunity to compete?
Right.
They're like, well, really, the law says actually all the missions should be such competition, and there may be some that we're unable to do, or our track record is not sufficient, or for some reason we can't complete it, but then that would fall out of the competition. Right. The crazy thing is not having a competition at all. Right. So, I mean, in terms of what would be happening, I don't know. I mean, I think some increase in the, I don't know, through at least a few missions that are taken out of the not competed and put into the let's compete them category. Yeah. I mean, let's compete and lose. I mean, that's fine.
Right. Yeah. So you expect some kind of resolution, perhaps in the next few weeks?
We're hopeful, but we don't. I honestly don't know what to expect. Okay. So it seems it's difficult to say. Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, what's your sense of the difference that having ULA working with Bezos and Blue Origin? I mean, what is
it's a compliment of sorts, I suppose. If all of our competitors are going up against us, okay. It's certainly. I think there's some strange bedfellows there.
Why do you say that? I mean, it does give them an American solution and undercuts the argument of the Russian.
Culturally, they're pretty different. Blue Origin is sort of this kind of startup technology culture, sort of small high tech culture.
Yeah.
Versus, versus the sort of the staid big aerospace companies. That certainly that had a blue origin. It almost came out of the blue. Yeah. It's I mean, I would be surprised if I don't think Blue Origin understands just how stringent the Defense Department requirements are for an engine. They're really pretty intense.
Right.
So I thought they're in for a surprise on that front. But frankly, I don't mind. I think that's if companies should just get together and compete as best they can. Right. Totally cool. Yeah. Just have it be a fair game.
Right.
That's all. If it's have a fair game, level playing field. May the best company or group of companies win, and that ultimately serves the interests of, in this case, the taxpayer and national security.
Well, and there's this whole issue of the cost plus contracting, which gives advantage to the incumbents. So
yes.
Even if they open up the procurement process to a new entrant, the new entrant is one hand tied behind their back in terms of trying to compete.
Yes, absolutely. They get huge sums of money, and it's extremely difficult to compete. But essentially, ULA has decided that they're afraid even of an unfair competition. So it's they don't want a fair competition. They don't even want an unfair competition. They want no competition at all.
What do you think is their biggest fear Is it SpaceX technology, or is it?
Yeah, I guess they're afraid that we'll, that the huge gravy train that they have exclusive access to is now going to be not as big. But the truth is that they'll still be the primary supplier for a long time.
Right.
We're just talking about taking some portion of that. And I think even in the very long term, the Defense Department is likely to want to retain two companies. So they're not going to want to have a single rocket family. So with ULA, they have the Delta and the Atlas family. And it used to be obviously Boeing and Lockheed competing, and then I don't know if you know the backstory. There's all sorts of shenanigans, like Boeing stole thousands of documents from Lockheed and used those in their competition against Lockheed, and Lockheed found out. And I mean, these guys, there's some pretty bad track records here of like really bad behavior. Like Boeing CFO went to jail for bribing the top F4 procurement officer and had been doing so for years. I don't know if you know the Darlene Druyan situation where, so there's this notion of sort of it's not sort of paranoia or made out. People did time
Right.
in the big house. They were like, you can pretty much bet that's the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
The Air Force did a thorough investigation and concluded that was the only one.
Have you hired?
It was only her.
Have you hired many people from Lockheed and Boeing here? I mean,
Yeah, we certainly have many people from the Air Force, from Lockheed and Boeing, and so yeah. It's about a third of the company comes from the aerospace industry, sort of traditional aerospace industry.
And what's the head count here now?
We're just over 4,000.
Wow, it's bigger than I had thought.
Yeah, we were quite a bit in the last year or so.
It sounds like, this is also leading to satellites, right?
Yeah.
Moving satellites. You doing satellites. Are you going to set up a full-fledged, office to do that?
We are. That's actually what we're going to announce on Friday. Well, it's been around for. We're creating a engineering center in Seattle. It's actually a satellite office creating satellites. So that's we're going to have the sort of we had a soft opening and we'll have like the sort of big announcement on Friday. So we're going to have we're going to try to do for satellites what we've done for rockets. See if we can make some improvements to the satellite arena.
How big of an office in Seattle?
It's going to be fairly significant. I think ultimately probably several hundred people, maybe 1,000 people.
Okay.
So it's big.
At the start.
At the start, it's we're like maybe up to 60 people.
Okay. How long before you would get to say 1,000 people?
Probably 3 or 4 years.
There's a lot of engineers in the Seattle area who are probably looking for jobs right now.
Actually,
Microsoft,
yeah.
ex-Nokia, ex...
Exactly. And also people from Boeing and from others. So we expect it'll be primarily focused on satellites, but we'll also for people that are, if there's like really excellent talent that wants to work on rockets, but for family reasons just refuses to live in LA, like a lot of people refuse to live in LA, then they can work at the Seattle office.
And that's been a very difficult area for other entrepreneurs. McCaw's experience, for example, comes to mind.
Like and everything?
Yeah. Why are you so optimistic about the area of satellite? I mean, it's just been incredibly difficult, and people have lost billions on satellite development.
Yeah, we might join them. I think there's
Why is it ripe for innovation?
Yeah. Well, most satellites are really quite primitive. That you sort of think like satellite technology would be really advanced, but if you look at how these, particularly the big satellites, are done for the geostationary stuff, they really want something that's flight proven or or space proven. So, if you start your design process and say we want proven technology, it's not going to be new technology. So then you design it with essentially old technology. It takes a while to build that design, and then you've got to go launch the design. And so by the time the satellites typically launch, they're actually really outdated technology, like 5 to 10 years old.
Yeah.
And then for a geostationary satellite that's up there for 15 years, by the end of its life, I mean, it's a quarter of a century old technology. It's in electronics. This is super ancient stuff. But people, because they go with kind of like the Battlestar Galactica, packing everything into one giant satellite, and are petrified, like if anything goes wrong, their whole business could collapse. It ends up you end up with old technology. If you instead go with smaller satellites that you launch more frequently, you can use present day technology, or even cutting edge stuff that isn't even necessarily in the hands of consumers. Take a chance on the satellite not working, but since we're launching frequently and we can test it out frequently, we can actually verify that it's going to work in space, and actually have technology that's a decade, or in some cases 2 decades, more advanced